Welcome. We are at NRB, and I'm Ann Beal. My co-host today, Dr. Jim Slaughter.
Hey, everybody.
And I'm very excited to bring you two wonderful men, Lee Strobel and his book, A Case for Heaven. And I have Mani Sandoval. Now, you are the producer?
Yeah, producer-director, yeah.
Producer-director. Yeah. And your website, I'd like to tell them immediately for the movie.
Yeah.
What is it?
thecaseforheavenmovie.com.
We are excited about your movie. And I know that you're in the movie, too.
Yeah.
And you produced it, and you're in the movie, and you interviewed so many people.
Yes.
What brought you to actually do that, to write the book and make the movie?
Well, I almost died 10 years ago.
Yeah.
My wife found me unconscious and called an ambulance, and I woke up in the emergency room, and the doctor looked down at me and said, "You're one step away from a coma, 2 steps away from dying." And then I went unconscious again. So I had a rare medical condition called hyponatremia, which is a severe drop in blood sodium level. And so I hovered between life and death for quite a while until they were able to save me. And it's a very clarifying experience, because you want to know for sure what happens if I close my eyes and I don't open them in this world. Is there an afterlife? Of course, as a Christian, I believe the Bible and what it teaches. But I've also got a skeptical gear because my background's in journalism and law, so I tend to be skeptical. So I wanted to investigate what is the evidence that supports or contradicts what the Bible tells us about the afterlife. And that's what launched me on my investigation that resulted in the book, The Case for Heaven, and then through my friendship with Mani Sandoval, the new film.
Wow. So lawyers, they don't trust. they don't trust very well, right?
They don't,
No.
and I think it's healthy to have a degree of skepticism.
Me too.
Even the Bible says test everything and hold on to that which is good, and so it would be better if some people would have a bit of skepticism about things they've been told. But I think what happens is when you investigate the case for heaven, you find that we have clear and compelling evidence that the Bible's telling us the truth, that there is indeed an afterlife, that there is a heaven, there is a hell. I have 2 chapters on hell in my book.
Oh, you do?
And even a chapter on reincarnation and so forth, looking at other alternatives and putting them to the test. And I think the film does a powerful job of encouraging believers, giving them renewed hope, but also for non-believers, I believe could be a turning point for many people that they may come to faith as a result of seeing this film. Don't you, Andy?
Yeah, I think what we try to do is make the apologetics in the book more accessible in the film, in the sense from a story perspective. So as people, we can relate to a lot of people's stories or struggles because we see ourselves in that struggle. But what we're trying to present here is that why is it that we believe what we believe? And if you don't believe in God, how is it so prevalent in your life that you don't even know it? And then we go into science, history, philosophy, which philosophy was a big one for me. I didn't know that could work out, you know what I mean? And I learned so much about that. So I think what we try to do is create an experience, because this is a theatrical movie. So if people are going to spend their hard-earned money, we really don't want to waste their time. It takes a lot of time to get the babysitter. It takes a lot to get to the theater, period, these days, right?
Yeah.
So we want, and our promise to the audience is we're encouraging them that, this movie moved us, hence why we're creating. So we wouldn't put out anything that doesn't move us. So I think something we've been saying a lot is this film is an opportunity for that mother, that father, the husband, that friend that's praying, man, how do I share my faith? And the point is not for this film to just do it all for you. The truth is you can learn how to do it yourself. And I think that's what's powerful about God, is that he gives us that choice, the ability to use our mind, our hearts, and dive into it. It's ours. It's accessible for us. We just got to seek the truth.
In the first few chapters of your book, you talk about how prevalent, almost universal, is this thinking about death, whether people realize it or not.
Yes.
And that virtually everything that, at least from the humanistic perspective, that we do is about that.
Yeah.
How do I live longer? How can I be more healthy? How can I do this?
Because if you don't believe in an afterlife, this is all you have. The only way you can live on without God is leave a mark in this world. So you want to write a great book, or design a cathedral, or paint a masterpiece, or shoot John Lennon.
Yeah,
which
that's
is what
crazy.
Yeah,
I saw that. I was like, oh,
Mark
I didn't know
David
that's
Chapman said, "I did it to steal his fame."
Yeah.
And the Columbine killers said, "Who's going to direct the movie about us. They wanted to live on and so forth. So there's a lot of negative things.
Take people's lives so that my life will go on longer, even after I die. Or take people's fame. Again, it's like envy, right?
Yeah, it is.
And take it. I want that. Even that.
Yeah.
You mentioned about putting your name on buildings.
Right.
I have noticed that they change.
Yeah.
Oh, that's the name of the building, or that's the really football stadiums.
Yes. They like change every week.
And that's very expensive.
Yes.
Yeah, because they had the one in Dallas, the new Dallas Stadium, and now it's called something else. It's AT&T now.
I know. Yeah, Cowboy Stadium's AT&T Stadium. What?
So money can outbuy you.
Yeah, there is a common one that the one about naming your children.
Yes.
You know, and the point of legacy, and that was convicting. I mean, how many of us do that? Or think about it that way? You know, it's we live our lives doing all these things, but we don't realize sometimes like what we're doing or why we're doing it. And I think this film really just gives you like a step back and go, oh man, like we got a lot to think about here. You know, everything we do matters.
Well, and when you said that most people don't know their grandparents,
great-grandparents,
and I do, because it's Alfred Kelly Bartlett the third. My brother's the third,
and
my grandfather's the second. My great-grandfather's the first, and they had a pocket watch they passed down. Now, I'm not like, he's the only junior, he's the third. There aren't any other of those in the family. But for me, people were saying that I should name my daughter Ann, and I'm like, I don't want to put that on them, you know. But you know, lots of families, like the oldest, their first name, the son is Robert, you know, so they have all these Robert Beals or all these, you know, and so part of it, I really related to that, and and it is like, if you don't have so many people depressed that they don't have a boy, because their name won't live on, and you know, and so trying to do that, but this is the perfect time. I know you started filming it before COVID or during COVID?
It was actually we started development before COVID, and then once COVID started, we were in production.
Is that amazing? Because people are much more afraid of death.
Absolutely.
They think about it all along. I
That's
mean,
29% of Americans know someone who's died of COVID. My brother died at the beginning of the pandemic. I just met a guy this morning. He's lost 8 people he knows during the pandemic. And it's causing people to ask questions and say, golly, I just lost a family member. What happens next? Are they still around? Are they still living? Will I see them again someday? And these are all legitimate questions that people have. And fortunately, we have good answers for that. And I think, as Manny just said, which I think is so good, when you can combine apologetics, which is cerebral evidence, with the heart and with stories, it makes an impact on people that is amplified.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, I believed in God my whole life, but it was important for myself to surround myself with other people that don't have the same walk of life or experience, you know? Like, a lot of the people in the film, the guests, they were atheists, agnostics. You know what I mean? One of our writers came to faith during the making of the film. You know what I mean? So what I'm getting at is everyone's journey is different, but the evidence is there. And I think God is so much closer to us than we think. Yeah. You know what I mean? And I think that's what the film is so beautiful, because I think it makes people realize, oh my gosh, that's me, isn't it? But you can't see yourself until you have that different perspective. It's like a mirror almost, you know? And we didn't want to shy away from the hard questions. We have a gentleman in the film that is asking some really hard questions and wrestling with his faith and all those things. And I think that's very relatable, because I think a lot of young people have a lot of questions, you know? But when we're looking for the answers, the question is, where are we looking for the answers?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
How were you able to maintain, I don't know, a kind of... objectivity about the task that you were involved in, especially when you were interviewing people whose ideas about the afterlife and faith are very different.
Yeah, I think it's, God in his sense of humor took a guy who'd been an atheist but trained in journalism and law, brought me to faith, but then redeemed my journalism background and my legal background so that that's what I do, is interview people. And I will travel and I will sit down with people and ask them the tough questions and try to listen respectfully to what people have to say, but then test it against the evidence. Like we did this chapter on reincarnation and said, there's millions of people who believe in reincarnation. Why don't I believe in reincarnation? Because of all the evidence against it and the internal inconsistencies and contradictions in it. And so I don't think we should be afraid to ask questions or to put our faith to the test. Because we, as Christians, have an unfair advantage in the marketplace of ideas. We have truth on our side.
That's true.
And so we ought to be confident as we engage with others.
You actually interviewed people who had like investigated all these people who had died and come back.
Near-death experiences.
Near-death experiences.
Yes.
How many?
Oh, how many? Well, golly, these are much more common than people think. What was the number? 1 out of every 25 Americans?
Yeah, it's like 13 million Americans had a near-death experience. And what's interesting, too, is that I didn't know what an NDE was. And secondly, I didn't know how you could credibly believe in one. And third, it was like so supernatural. I'm like, how could we know this for sure? What does this mean? What does it tell us? And the first thought that came to my mind is like, man, this is a little new agey, and I bet some people think it's heresy. But the question is, why are these happening, and what is it telling us? And Lee does a great job. How does it tie to
we have to look at, are they consistent with Christian theology? Mm-hmm. John Burke, Christian pastor, studied 1,000 near-death experiences, found the commonalities in them, and says they are consistent with Christian theology. How do we know they're real and somebody's not just making this stuff up? Because we only dealt with cases where there was corroboration. So, for instance, a woman named Maria who died in the hospital, but she said, I was conscious the whole time. And she described how her spirit separated from her body. She saw the resuscitation efforts taking place. Her spirit floated out of the hospital. And then when she was revived, her spirit returned to her body. And she said, oh, by the way, there's a man's tennis shoe on the roof of the hospital. And it's dark blue. It's left-footed. It's a man's tennis shoe. There's a little wear over the little toe. And the shoelace is tucked under the heel. And they go up in the roof and they found it just like this. That's just one of many examples that we deal with where we have outside independent corroboration, including blind people who've been blind since birth, and yet they're able to see for the first time during their near-death experience. And when they recover, they're blind once more. As one researcher said, that's physically impossible. And yet we have 21 cases that have been documented. So I think we have good evidence that indeed we have a soul, we have a spirit, that it does separate from our body, just like the Bible says. Paul said to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. And we have the resurrection of Jesus, which gives us confidence that he is not just an eyewitness to the afterlife, since he died and came back from the dead, but that confirmed his identity as being the Son of God. So he created the afterlife. So we ought to give special consideration to what he says about these things. And he becomes the expert that we should lean upon.
Wow, I just can't believe the timing, because people truly are terrified of dying.
Yeah.
They are so terrified. And then we've actually, they're calling it actually COVID PTSD now.
Yeah.
Because they were so traumatized, being really believed.
Right.
The kids were not allowed to come home because
Right.
their mom didn't want to die.
Right.
And they weren't, truly, they were like, if you come through my house, you'll die. So talk about looking at death so closely.
Right.
I don't think people have really, on a whole, done that. And it's perfect timing. Where would people go to find the movie? And what date does it come out?
Yeah, if they go to thecaseforheavenmovie.com, you can put in your zip code or your city's name. Like, for instance, I was going to be in Chattanooga, Tennessee on opening night. And I thought, I hope the movie's opening in Chattanooga. Went in there, typed in Chattanooga, boom, it came up. Yeah, sure enough. It's in 1,000 theaters, coast to coast.
Wow.
So that's what you can also see the trailer there and some background information. So that's a great place to go, a great resource to go. A lot of churches are buying out movie theaters and encouraging their congregation to take the tickets and invite a friend. At Colorado Christian University, where I have a center, we've rented out a movie theater to show the students the film. And Manny wouldn't tell you this, but he and his brother have rented out a theater in the inner city of New York, of L.A.
Oh, wow.
And they're giving free tickets away to kids that can't afford it. So I think it's an opportunity. Manny's doing that.
Are the 4th, 5th, and 6th? Are you good for all?
4th, 5th, and 6th, yep.
4th, 5th.
Yeah, and this is in LA. So we grew up in South Central LA. My parents came from Guatemala, so we're an immigrant family from South Central. So it's like the projects, the government housing. So what we're really trying to do, and what we want to challenge anyone who's listening is, truly, you don't have to be a pastor or have a church to invite someone to come see this movie. Right. Our promise is that we wanted to make it accessible and a conversation piece. So that when you can invite someone, that they could really understand what is it that you truly believe, but also as a believer, it can challenge you in your faith. And actually, in my opinion, it just makes me more thrilled because what I believe is so real, tangible, and this evidence is so compelling. And we want to encourage people, take the risk. I wouldn't be here if someone didn't take the risk of sharing the gospel with my dad.
Take the risk.
And that person was my mother.
Oh, really? Wow.
She could have gave up, but she didn't.
The film is beautiful.
It was.
Just remarkable. Good job.